Talking about E3 was already difficult enough before we ditched the shambling corpse of the convention itself in favor of embracing a broad concept of E3 season, or Summer Games Fest, as I suppose we are meant to call it. E3 is apparently going to be back next year, at least that's what they claim. I wouldn't hold my breath. I'd say Geoff is the new boss of summer game announcements for the foreseeable future. So how did he do this year?
Dwayne Johnson, welcome to Summer Game Fest. How are you?
Mr. Keeley, I'm gonna need to see you after class. For no particular reason, I'm gonna talk about Xbox's show first. They showed Redfall, a game which is definitely not Left 4 Dead. Do not compare it to Left 4 Dead for real, you guys. As much as giving us a cinematic nothing trailer last year was a waste of everybody's time, now that I can actually see it, yeah, I mean, it looks fun enough, I guess. Arcane's games are most interesting when they actually give you a lot of wacky tools and encourage you to use them. Dishonored got in its own way in that regard with the morality system. Deathloop kind of corrected that, but now Redfall is going to have a new way of discouraging you from experimenting and doing wacky things with your powers. Toxic teammates. So, we'll see how that goes. Silksong made its triumphant return at Xbox's show, still no release date, but considering how long the Hollow Knight fans have gone without so much as a drop of water, just seeing the game and getting confirmation it's coming out sometime in the next 12 months must seem like a veritable flood. Of course, the big Xbox showcase game this year was Starfield. Starfield is a sci-fi role-playing game brought to you by the people who made Fallout 4 and Fallout 76. Also, The Outer Worlds is a sci-fi role-playing game brought to you by the people who made Fallout New Vegas. I just thought I'd mention that here randomly for no reason. Speaking of the people who brought you Fallout New Vegas, Obsidian revealed a cool murder mystery game with a Middle Ages art style. You know that's gonna be interesting. And ooh, did you guys see this Ravenlock game? The Dark Alice in Wonderland thing obviously isn't a new concept, especially not in video games, but check out this art style. All these bright colors and blocky characters, and the environments like, ooh, look at that, ooh, look at that. Oh, this game's gorgeous. Look at that. Keep my eye on this one. The big no-show for Xbox this year, to me, was Machine Games. I haven't actually played any of the recent Wolfensteins yet, but I've been told by people I trust they're pretty good, and last year they announced an Indiana Jones game. Now, the minute-to-minute gameplay of BJ Blazkowicz's latest outings don't really seem suited to an Indiana Jones adventure, so I very much wanted to get a better look at how they were gonna handle the game. Guess I'm gonna have to wait a little longer. What else did they show at Xbox this year? Oh my, the Mad Men! They did it! Minecraft 2! Ah, it's just some spin-off, never mind, let's go back to Geoff's show.
Now it's time for a game made by a single father in Poland. Over the past year, he's brought on some help.
Geoff, you just told me the game was made by one guy. I believed you. Joey and I talk a lot about magic shooters, and we saw several of those this year. Witchfire had fairly conventional guns, but you're fighting monsters and you got some superpowers to play with. Metal Hellsinger is a rhythm shooter. There was another game that tried something like this a few years ago called BPM Bullets Per Minute, and that was interesting, but this looks a lot more polished and also isn't a roguelike, so that could be neat. Naughty Dog showed up, and I say that with the biggest possible quotation marks and the most literal possible reading of they certainly did appear on stage during the show, looked at some concept art for a game they announced 3 years ago, said they're working on something else. Ooh, wow, a video game company is making new video game, big news. Oh, and also they're remaking The Last of Us. This threw a lot of people for a loop because, yeah, remaking this game is excessively unnecessary, so let me tell you the excessively detailed secrets of why it's actually being remade that Sony doesn't want you to know. Story time, kids! The news on this game actually broke a while back. Basically, Sony has decided that big budget blockbuster games are the only first-party titles they give a damn about anymore, which is why Studio Japan got shut down a little while back. Everybody's Golf and Gravity Rush just didn't do Spider-Man or Horizon sales numbers, and that brings us to Visual Arts Service Group, which is a studio that basically just does support for major Sony first-party games. They wanted to get a bit more autonomy and decided a good way to do that would be to prototype a remake of Uncharted Drake's Fortune. It was gonna be a kind of a proof of concept that they could develop projects in-house, even if it was just a remake of other Sony games, at least to start with. But eventually the small team that was trying to get that off the ground decided that Drake's Fortune was a little too crusty, a little too old, would be too hard to do in what was essentially the studio's free time, so they switched focus to The Last of Us since it was more recent and would be easier to do. Eventually, they pitched the project to Sony, and Sony liked the project so much that it was taken off their hands and foisted onto Naughty Dog so that it could be done properly. And if that whole situation sounds stupid to you, it's only because it is. Now let's be very clear, I'm not saying you shouldn't clown on this unnecessary remake or Captain Crunch over here. I'm just making sure you have as much information as possible so your clowning can be that much more pointed. Anyway, story time over. I just wasted a lot of time talking about one game. You know, I'll tell you what, let's see how many video games I can talk about in the same amount of time that The Rock was on screen talking about not video games. Bunch of games with cool art styles this year. Visually, Skate Story looks incredible. There's also 9 Years of Shadows, a game with a cool name and even cooler high-fidelity pixel art. On the reverse end of the spectrum, we've got Animal Well. Its pixel art is not as detailed, but is very ambitious in entirely different ways. It's all relatively simple lines and shapes, but with complex animations, dynamic lighting, and physics, it's spellbinding to look at. This game called Alterium Shift looks like a good version of Square Enix's 2D HD games. Frog and Fox Travelers is a PS1 RPG-looking-ass horror game, and Choo Choo Charles is a horror game made by the Gmod generation, and I say that with the utmost affection. Goat Simulator 3 did a parody of Dead Island 2's trailer, and the Dead Island 2 trailer is so old and everyone cared so little about it that you've probably forgotten Dead Island 2 never actually released. Suffice to say, I thought this was pretty funny. Aliens Dark Descent showed so little gameplay, edited so quickly that the footage was deliberately played as a jump scare. Even worse, Marvel Midnight Suns got a totally useless cinematic trailer with no gameplay. See, I prefer real video games like Neon White. This is a speedrunning, card-based FPS made by freaks for freaks, and if you tell me you've ever heard a better pitch than that in a trailer, then you're just a liar. Naiad is a game where you just kinda float around in the water with flowers and stuff. A lot of games about mortality this year. We've got Seasons, A Letter to the Future, where you ride around a world that is apparently doomed for some reason and record its stories for historical record. Much simpler visual style for Time Flies, where you play as a fly with mere minutes to live and have to check items off your bucket list. Two neat-looking games that don't seem to be about mortality, despite their titles. The Earthbound 3 looking Goodbye World, and the whatever the hell this is looking How to Say Goodbye. No idea what this is, but it's cool. Shim is a game where you platform between the shadows of objects. As I was watching this trailer, I thought it felt sort of like an imaginary game a child would play, only stepping in shadows. And then the developer said it was inspired by exactly that, so pretty charming. Bear and Breakfast is a video game where you are a bear and run a bed and breakfast, so what's not to like about that? A little to the left is an OCD simulator. American Arcadia is a paranoia simulator. Rollerdrome is a being the coolest woman on the planet simulator. I mean, look at this. I love this. I need this yesterday. This is Jet Set Radio, but you shoot people with explosive ammunition, so it's pretty much a shoo-in for Game of the Year. The Plucky Squire is neat looking, kind of like a reverse Link Between Worlds. You got 2D animation when he's inside the book or on other surfaces, then you get out and it becomes a Toy Story scale 3D platformer. How can you not love this? Normally I'd have nothing to say about Forza, but Forza Motorsports' perpetual job is to surpass Gran Turismo, and this time around the bar is possibly lower than it has ever been. If the game does not charge you hundreds of dollars to drive digital cars in the game about driving digital cars, then it wins.
Enjoy your gaming.
A lot of spooky games this year. For my money, the coolest one is Signalis. It's got those classic survival horror vibes, but unlike most classic survival horror games, it actually looks scary. It mixes PS1 visuals and pixel art in a way that's deceptively precise and crafted. It's not just a choice to give the game an arbitrary retro style. There is some extremely clever visual design going on here. There is a sense of detachment to something as simple as a static first-person perspective on a door swinging open that is so hard to explain, but is so effective at building a sense of dread, even in the simplest interactions. It's coming out just in time for Halloween. Very convenient. Not only were there a lot of spooky games this year, there were a lot of spooky outer space games specifically. This System Shock remake has been coming out next year for 5 years now, supposedly releasing this year, but I'll believe it when I see it. We have another definitely not Left 4 Dead game, Warhammer 40k Darktide, and several different games trying very hard to be Dead Space. Fort Solace, Routine. Daymare 1994 actually has a character with a big glowing blue thing on their back, so that's not terribly subtle. But of course, the Dead Spaciest game of them all is the Callisto Protocol, brought to you by a lot of the same developers who made the original Dead Space. What the hell, Joy, what the hell are you doing in my house?
Get out of the way. Oh my God, guys, it's back. Dead Space isn't dead. Well, I mean, Dead Space is dead, but the spirit of Dead Space is not dead. Same people, I cannot wait. Oh my God. Look, they got the guns, they got the environment, they got the necromorphs. They don't really look like necromorphs, they just look like regular people, but they act like them. And you got the limb shooting, and you got melee again. Melee's different this time. Before, you just stomp or you just punch, and it wasn't very good, but now it's like a parry.
Joey, look, Dragon's Dogma 2!
Yo, oh my God, I've been waiting 10 years for this. I can't.
Just go to sleep. Just go to sleep.
あるのは暴力と死だけだ。
Anyway, speaking of Dragon's Dogma, Capcom kicked down the door this year looking strong, except for Ken. Ken wasn't looking too hot. Bunch of interesting add-ons and improvements for recent Resident Evil titles. RE4 Remake confirmed. The RE4 Remake is a weird one. It was already a third-person shooter, and it's basically never been off proverbial store shelves. Maybe because the original version is so readily available, I'm more willing to give this game a shot, see how RE4 is handled with a tone closer to that of the recent remakes, and, compare and contrast it with the camp of the original release as opposed to overwriting it. The real question is whether they're gonna quit here or if they're gonna try and remake Resident Evil 5. Remakes, oh boy, Square Enix had a whole 2 remakes to show off this year. Maybe 2 3/4 remakes if you count this thing. I'm sure a lot of you guys want me to talk all about this Final Fantasy stuff, but honestly, I'm stuck between not having enough to say or having too much to say. I guess I'll try my best. Despite being very skeptical about the entire prospect of remaking Final Fantasy VII before it was actually released, many of you know that since the game came out, I've since become the head of the Final Fantasy VII Remake fan club. My biggest concern since then is how long it would take for them to actually finish the project, because 4 parts was always gonna be one too many. So hearing them finally confirm the series is locked down to 3 games is very good news as far as I'm concerned. They can't drag this out longer than 3 games, and I guess hypothetically 6 years if things go very speedily on the 3rd part. Crisis Core seems to actually play like a video game now, so that's good for the people who want to play Crisis Core, but I'm not one of those people because I remember Crisis Core.
What do angels dream of?
For you are beloved by the goddess. I'll take the world with me to a world that abhors you and I.
Shut up!
All that awaits you.
Shut up! I'm warning you!
Final Fantasy 16 is still a year out. I gotta say, from all the little bits of news we've been getting for the last 6 months, it certainly felt like it was coming this year, so that news was a bit of a blow. Also a blow was the fact that this new trailer didn't really give us a better sense of what the game was going to be. We got some interviews a few weeks later that actually did paint a much better picture of what the game is going to be like. They're saying all the right things, in my personal opinion. They're not overextending themselves by trying to make it an open world game, for one thing. The game is being recorded and motion captured in English first, so this may be the first Final Fantasy game yet to be cringe-free. Personally, I can tolerate and occasionally even enjoy a good cringe, but the point is that this game has a chance to reach a much wider audience, including people who have maybe fallen out of love with the series over the last decade. Some other neat news about the game, apparently all of the summon boss battles will have completely different mechanics. Apparently we'll follow the main character from his teenage years all the way to his 30s, and best of all, we learned the name of the dog. That's easily the biggest news of the year.
Enjoy your gaming.